Phil, Brian Rice is on the line.
The best producer in the world.
Okay, whatever. B. Rice, what's going on?
I feel I don't know how to feel about that intro between first I was ready to go out there for a third down, but then I was ready to have a completely underwhelming time thanks to thinking of Jeremy Pruitt. Did you hear about him with the poker tournament this past weekend?
I did not.
No.
He made the top 20 of an $1,100 buy-in tournament up in Cherokee, North Carolina. There were like 1,000 people in it.
Hey, good for him. Got to find some type of way to get that UT money.
Was his payout in a McDonald's bag?
I was wondering about that.
I have questions about that myself, but some people were well, I didn't think he was smart enough to play like that, and I kind of take the opposite view. That poker face has got to be pretty good because he just has the same lump expression all the time. I mean,
Well, B. Rice.
He did. He played in a WSOP event. He played in a World Series of Poker event, $1,100 buy-in tournament. And so what was the payout here? He finished 23rd, $2,900 in winnings.
Yeah. So he doubled his money. Probably
almost tripled it
on that driving there.
Well, his poker face tricked us into hiring him, so it's got to be good for something, right?
That's a really good point, Ramon. That's a really good point.
That's all
I guess Giano had stuff on the bottom of the deck.
We can do this all day. I promise you I got
we
time.
sure can.
I promise you I got time. Is this what happens when you cheat the wrong way in sports? I mean, you go to play poker tournaments during football season?
Well, it's got to be. I mean, right now it has to be incredibly disconcerting for him because this is the first time since he was in high school, probably, or before he was in high school, that he hasn't had a football season to get ready for between high school, college, coaching, and then coaching in the NFL last year. So he's probably finding it difficult to fill the hours. He's like Tom Brady, you go home like, so this is what it's like, huh? Well, I need to find literally anything else to do.
Yeah, I figured that was the case, man. That's crazy that he's making headlines like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of poker, Vols fans poked by not being ranked.
Yeah, I thought that in the AP poll they would be ranked. I was not particularly surprised by the coaches poll, just knowing how that poll works sometimes. But I would, Tennessee's the first team out of the top 25. I don't think that's anything to be too angry about.
Yeah.
You're having an opportunity. You're having an opportunity early. You have a Pittsburgh team that's ranked, I believe, 18th in one poll, and I believe that's where they are in the AP. You're gonna have an opportunity to take on that in week 2, depending on what they do against West Virginia in week 1, and then obviously you have Florida a couple of weeks later. The top 25 is going to sort itself out for Tennessee over the first month of the season. So are they disrespected by not being ranked in the preseason? Maybe a little, but I don't think it's enough for fans to get fired up about with what you have out there the first 4 weeks of the season.
You think there was much reaction from the coaching staff about that, or as far as the players concerned, since they're going through camp right now? We saw this stuff when it came out, and I'm sure they did too yesterday.
I mean, I think Josh Heupel uses it as another motivator of, look, people don't respect you. People saw what you did last year, and they still don't respect you for it. So is that a little extra edge? Does that help you in week 2? Does it help you get through the doldrums of camp? Maybe a little bit, but if these guys are worried about where they are in the top 25, then they're not worried about the right things right now. But I'm sure it came up yesterday. I'm sure there was hey, people are still doubting us.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard some hype about us all summer, but when it comes down to it, people still don't believe in this football team. And I don't know that that's a bad place for them to approach the first few weeks of the season. If they were feeling a little high, it was a great way for Josh Heupel to kind of snap that back and say, guys, we haven't arrived.
Yeah. What did arrive, though, is 2 new commits. Both cornerbacks, man. One was one that Georgia was really after, and another was one Texas thought they had him. They predicted him to commit to Texas, and you pretty much snatched him out of Baton Rouge right next to LSU.
Yeah, it was a really good weekend for Josh Heupel on the recruiting front. And what I like from a football standpoint is over the past few years, the last couple of staffs have recruited defensive backs.
Yeah.
They haven't recruited corners. They've recruited guys who can kind of play all over, but not true corners. And I think where that's hurt has been very obvious. You've seen guys who are not good covering one-on-one. You've seen guys that are getting beaten time after time after time. So how have they addressed that? By going out and recruiting true corners who are ready to come in and play that position. Not, well, we might work them in at star, we might work them in at nickel, they can play safety. No, these guys are corners who are going to play corner. I love that for Tennessee, particularly with what you're going to ask defensive backs to do over the next few years. Tennessee's gone heavy on recruiting edge rushers.
Yeah.
That tells me that they want to put those guys in position to make plays, which means your defensive backs are going to have to be ready to make plays if you're taking some chances on defense up front. So I love this, but also, as you mentioned, who you beat out for guys is important. Okay, the first player out of the state of Alabama ranked as a 3-star, but you mentioned it. Picked up a Georgia offer a little earlier this summer.
Yep.
Had some other big-time offers that had come in recently. And Tennessee had been in on him from the start. Those relationships that this staff is finally having a chance to build over the course of a couple of years is paying off. And I love that. Willie Martinez brings the experience and the example of being able to point to guys who maybe were a little underrated in high school that he put in the league. Manuel Mosley's one. Cam Sutton's one. Those things matter on the recruiting trail. And then, yeah, you go to Baton Rouge and you get a guy. I think you took advantage of the uncertainty at LSU over the last year to build a relationship there. And then I think you also took advantage of what's going on at Texas. Yeah, next year's recruiting class is great, but they're still 2 years away. And I think right now there are still, some questions around Steve Sarkisian. So you go in and you pitch. Here's the sure thing that we are going to do on defense at Tennessee. And, again, based on his quotes, the relationships are what made the difference there.
So, and Brian Rice is joining us here on JMart Ramon. So, to that point, what you're pitching, are you also picturing, hey, we're a football school as well as a basketball school here, like unlike Kentucky? What do you make of that whole situation with Cal and Mark Stoops?
It's funny. Jimmy Himes asked Josh Heupel as he was walking away from the podium if Tennessee was a football school, and he looked at him, laughed, and said, boy, they've got a mess up there. And I think that's the best way to put it. Because you can't do this. John Calipari stepped in it. But when Mitch Barnhart blamed the media over the weekend for sensationalizing a story, no, the media didn't do anything. Okay, John Calipari sat down for an interview with The Athletic.
Yep.
He talked about what he wanted to talk about. If you read the story, it's very clear that the course of the interview was very open-ended. This is what Cal wanted to talk about. And he chose to not compare Kentucky to other basketball schools, to not compare Kentucky to other people. He went through the laundry list of, here's all the money that Kentucky spent on other sports. Where's mine?
Ooh.
And I mean, if I'm Mark Stoops, I don't like the way Mark Stoops has handled it and continued the story, but I don't blame him because Cal came after him. I mean, he said, you've spent this on football. We have the best practice facility, and I hope those guys win 10 games and go to bowl games. But we're a basketball school. He mentioned how much money they spent on the baseball stadium. If I'm the baseball coach, I'm extremely upset too, because he did the thing that you can't do, which is tell everybody that you don't think the other sports at Kentucky matter. He may not realize that's what he said, but that's what he said. And if anybody perceives it differently on that campus, they're lying to themselves. Okay,
Yeah.
so what do you do now? I think Mitch Barnhart coming down on the side of his football coach is and mentioning, hey, coaches move all the time. I was blown away by that, but it was kind of what I suspected, which is Cal has been pushing for this practice facility, which would, by the way, be the second one he's gotten since he's been coach there. But he's pushing for this practice facility, and he's been told no. And he's been told no repeatedly. And so what did he do? Try to wage a battle for it in the media. Well, you can't do that at this level. You just can't. And he stepped in it, and I think the feedback from the athletics department there is, you know what? Here's what we're doing for basketball. Yeah, it's a very important sport. No, it's not our most profitable sport. And if you've got a problem with it, there's the door. they're not going to fire Cal, but making this big play after you lost to St. Peter's in the first round is not going to help on the doorstep of football season, because it's football season.
Yep.
And everybody at Kentucky is excited for what they think is going to be the best football season in years, maybe ever there. And you're throwing this out right now. Cal terribly misplayed his hand here, and I'm not sure how he comes back from it unless, they go out and win big this year, win big right away. I don't know how you repair the relationships internally that he has fractured with the way he said what he said.
Yeah, the problem is, look, all those sports are constantly trying to prove their worth. And Cal basically tried to, in effect, buried him, whether he meant to or not in that moment. Like, if you want to have that discussion about your practice facilities and all that, you do that behind closed doors. Like, nobody wants to be at the restaurant where the couple that's kind of on the rocks is across the table or across the room from you arguing, and you're seeing it, and you're the kid in the meme that just keeps looking up every couple of seconds and then back down to your shoes. That's Kentucky right now. Like, infighting, that's a terrible look. And you can't do that in a year where, and Mo mentioned this yesterday, I thought the exact same thing. It's like, if I'm Heupel, if I'm anybody else that's looking at Kentucky recruit, I'm like, hey, man, do you really want to go to a basketball school when you could come play football here? Like, that right there can harm their recruiting.
Yeah. Well, and it's, if I'm Mark Stoops at the end of the year, I mean, he's turned down a lot of overtures from a lot of places over the years. So if I'm Mark Stoops at the end of the year, I think I give Mitch Barnhart credit for having my back. But at the end of the day, I start to look around and go, is this really worth it? Mm-hmm. Is it really worth it? And at the end of the day, who are the fans going to back?
Yep.
And I wonder what the answer to that question is, because they are a basketball school.
It's obvious.
It's been what's moved the meter there forever.
Yes.
Football's still more profitable. Football has more excitement right now. So how do you reconcile that? That's the challenge that Mitch Barnhart has. And I think he's a really good athletics director. I don't love how he's handled this, but I also don't know that he had a choice, because I think he's told Cal repeatedly behind the scenes, look, this is not our priority right now. We're not building something when we have something great already. Their practice facility opened in 2007. So don't tell me that it's way behind the others, because it's not. That's just a lie. You want something new for vanity. And, oh, by the way, your roof leaks. Call a roof company. They'll fix it, and you'll be fine.
I think also there's a possibility if you're Mitch Barnhart, Mark Stoops is maybe the best coach you're ever going to have there in terms of a football coach. And you also know eventually, I asked this yesterday, and Moan kind of thought the same way. Dude, that dude can get tired of this real fast.
Yep.
Like, it's not like there's not somebody else out there, like, I don't know, Auburn, or if it goes south with Brent Venables, maybe down at Oklahoma where the Stoops name is Roy. There's a lot of places Mark Stoops could go coach if he gets tired of this.
Is it easier to hire a basketball coach at Kentucky or a football coach at Kentucky?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As far as this season is shaking out, I saw Joe Milton had a good scrimmage the other day. What are those two guys looking like? Because all we've heard is how supportive Milton has been, considering he's the backup right now and lost his job, and Hendon Hooker's kind of taking a different leadership role, and that's going to be huge, because no matter the level, quarterback play at high school, college, and NFL matters the most.
Well, Eric mentioned it on our show yesterday, and Mo, this goes back to when you guys were playing. 2006, Eric hurts his ankle, and John Crompton wasn't ready to play as the backup, and because of that, you lost games against LSU and Arkansas, two teams that Tennessee was better than.
Yep.
And next year, Tennessee hammered Arkansas, and it was a close game with LSU regardless. But this program right now cannot afford to just have two games where you just don't have a chance because your quarterback got hurt. If Hendon Hooker sprains his ankle, they can run the same game plan with Joe Milton, and they can expect to have similar results with Joe Milton based on his development over the last year. Last year his problems were overthrows. You can still go run the same game plan with him in there with some of the short passing stuff that Hendon Hooker does, some of the movement from the quarterback position. You can go in and you don't have to sacrifice games if Hendon Hooker goes out for a game or two. Because, if you look around college football, the reality is you are probably going to need your backup quarterback to play at least part of a game this year. That's just how college football works in the modern age. So if Joe Milton's there and there's not a lot of drop-off, there's some drop-off, but the most important thing is the whole playbook's still available to Alex Golesh, then I think that's huge. He has taken steps forward. He has been very impressive in practice. People that have observed practice that I've talked to, the closed-door portion of practice, feel like Joe Milton has had as good of a camp as he did last year, and his camp last year was good enough to win the starting job. So if you have somebody who is that good and is bought in to being the backup and to being there when that helmet pops off for a play or that ankle gets turned, that's huge, because how many backup quarterbacks in college football are truly bought in to being the backup? How many are truly preparing every week like they're the starter so they can jump in? I think Tennessee has that, and that's an incredibly valuable piece in what's going to be a very important season for Tennessee.
So Pittsburgh is ranked in both polls, which actually caught me a little bit off guard. I missed that Keaton Slovis was there. That game's obviously important, not just because you want to get back at him for last year, but also it's just one of those where you want the momentum going into Florida. You want to be undefeated before Florida comes to you for the biggest game that you've played in that building in a long time. How dangerous do you think that Pittsburgh team is?
I think it's dangerous because they have the confidence of having beaten Tennessee last year and having, as you mentioned, Keaton Slovis coming in. Internally, they can sell it as, yeah, we lost Kenny Pickett, but we got somebody else who's just as talented. I don't know if that's true,
right?
But that's how they're selling it internally. It's a tremendously important game, as you said, for Tennessee because of what it sets up. Momentum is going to be so key. And if you win that game, it validates so much of the offseason, both from an internal football team standpoint, but also externally with everything that people have talked about with this program all offseason. So it's a dangerous game from the fact that I think there are a lot of people here in Knoxville, a lot of our listeners are just marking the Pitt game down as a win because it should have been a win last year. Well, I don't think you can do that because that's a really good football team. The top 25 rankings, no fluke. Now, they could go out to lose in West Virginia in week 1, and then they're an 0-1 football team that's maybe even more dangerous because the early season for Pitt coming off an ACC championship is tremendously important. If you beat West Virginia and you beat Tennessee, Pittsburgh's saying, we're going to roll to this ACC title game again. If you lose to West Virginia and lose to Tennessee or you split those games, then you have questions. Similarly for Tennessee, if you beat Pitt, you're 2-0, beat Akron 3-0, then it doesn't matter what Florida's done. I think a lot of people are looking at Florida's schedule and going, well, hey, Florida could come into Tennessee at 1-2. They have Utah and they have Kentucky. They could come in 2-1. But what if they come in 3-0? What if they've eliminated the Pac-12 from the college football playoff in week 1, and then they've turned around and beaten Kentucky in week 3, and they roll into Neyland Stadium with every piece of momentum? You want to be 3-0 for that matchup. You don't want to be 2-1 with some question marks because you went and laid an egg at Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Roman Harper, a little bit of a preseason troll. Consider he's an Alabama guy. Or you think he really believes 10-2?
I think there are a lot of people that believe that Tennessee can be that good. Will they ultimately? I think there's probably a producer in his ear saying, hey, you want to make some headlines? Go ahead. Say they're going to do it. Because, you can run the numbers. Our buddy Tyler Wyatt runs a lot of numbers for us on the show, and he only has Tennessee an underdog in two games right now. I think it would be more likely that you would beat LSU and lose to Georgia and Alabama, but somebody's got to take a swing at those two teams. And Tennessee, I think, has the offense to take a swing at Alabama. They have the offense to take a swing at Georgia, particularly if Georgia has some defensive issues with all they've replaced. I don't think they will because I think they're very, very talented on the defensive line. But, hey, Tennessee has the offense to take a shot. I don't know that Roman Harper believes that Tennessee can win that game. I don't know that he actually believes Tennessee can go 10-2. But you can certainly see the path to it.
Good stuff, B. Rice. We appreciate you, man. I know we'll catch up with you again before the season starts.
Gentlemen, it is Peyton Manning days until football time in Tennessee, and I can't wait.
I love it, B. Rice. I didn't expect that.
Peyton Manning days.
16, baby.
Remember he did the thing with the jersey numbers a few years ago on Twitter.
He's still doing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
he's still doing it.
615-737-1045 is the telephone number. 737-1045. If you have any problems with the top 25, I'm kind of with B. Rice. If you're not ranked, whatever, because you're going to be ranked pretty quick. Unless you don't deserve to be.
Unless you don't deserve to be.
Unless you prove otherwise, because you're right outside. And obviously, I think a lot of people are very high on Tennessee. I don't think you're starting on first base this year. I think you're probably starting on second. I wouldn't go as far to say you're starting on third, John Calipari.
Cal.